hit recording. I was gonna say, yeah. So we have a topic list. Let me pull this up.
Hi, YouTube. I'm Zippy.
Fine. How can we make raids more accessible and appealing to new members? Right. I think the question there. Uh, I guess, do we think um, more accessible to
Well,
members?
I have no issue saying this. I'm the one who
Oh,
brought
go ahead.
that to
Yeah, go ahead.
discussion.
Yes.
I don't think it's about making raids more accessible and enjoyable, at least at the heart of what I think. I think the biggest singular flaw in the community right now is that clans make make it difficult for someone who's never been involved in a military style clan before to get integrated in a fun, easy environment to get adjusted to. I think a lot of clans really struggle to bring new people in, and I think the new people that they do bring in generally get turned off very quickly because of the way that new recruits are generally handled in clans.
Um, Opinions on that? I'll jump in if I need to. But everybody's running now. This is unsurprising. Um, I think that a lot of that could be like I've thought about this before. I think I've discussed this in a couple podcasts or whatever. I think the problem here is that the gap between like the normal Halo experience, the stuff you find on matchmaking, right, and the stuff clans do is there's such a large gulf in between normal Halo and clan Halo that it's hard for people to make that transition. If you're casually interested, that's a super large learning curve. And I think that that's one of the major problems we have with onboarding people into clans in general.
May I say something real quick?
Go ahead.
I think another problem is like the whole boot camp scenario, or like the open lobbies. I think those are a big um, thing that's like going towards people not wanting to join clans and stuff. I mean, like nobody wants to sit through a 2 hour boot camp of doing crouch jumps and like just random shooting cones for like 2 hours. I think that's a thing that really harms the community of like gathering people.
Well, and okay, I understand that like the basis behind the boot camp is to test the discipline of people that you're trying to bring in as new members. But to an extent, that needs to be integrated once they've started to understand what they're a part of and once they've started to enjoy what they're being a part of. I don't think any I don't believe in the recruit needs to go through training to get into external activity stuff. And that's just me. And I know a lot of leaders don't agree with that. But I think that for the leaders who don't agree, who believe that new people entering the clan need a base level of training instead of just being thrown in and learning on the go, I think they need to understand that it needs to be performed in a way that's relatable. Find a way to make a PvP. Find a way to make people shoot their guns at moving targets. Find a way for them to enjoy it. And don't make it lengthy. If someone's sitting in a boot camp for longer than 30 minutes, it's ridiculous. 30 minutes should be the time cap.
I don't know. I'd argue that like I think boot camps are a lot of clans really really bad. I don't think that like I entirely agree with that point, right? But I think that it's not just the boot camps. Like fundamentally, you only go through boot camp once, and then some clans make you do more. I know Exodus, you had to go, you did trainings more than once, right? But I don't think that that's the real problem, right? Like what clans currently focus on are raids, right? The average raid we can assume is an hour and a half, 2 hours or more. I think it's a safe assumption for most scheduled raids for clan wars, etc. Right? In
Yeah.
comparison, the average matchmaking game runs you 15, 20 minutes, right? The average person who plays Halo, I don't have stats on this, but I would have to assume that the average Halo player does not sit in play Halo for 2 hours straight the majority of the time, right? So the time requirements we're demanding from people who are interested in clans is a barrier of entry in and of itself, right? I think that if we were to approach the idea where if we could, this is why I've been a fan of like having 8v8s or something in a shorter time span, because if we can make the average, you can join regardless. Somebody tell them that. But like if you could, like if the average clan event was only 30 minutes, right? Then more clans would be able to do clan things for comparison for clan wars, right? Like one of the main reasons a lot of clan war battles occur on the weekend is because people aren't free the weekdays, especially during the calendar school year. This is an age demographic of between like 15 and 18, right? So if we work at this age demographic, the majority of people have weekday obligations, so they can't do raids on weekdays, right? But if we were to convert or have more 8v8s as a more standard part of clan wars, then suddenly people can more reasonably fit in a 30-minute battle on a weekday, right? I think one of the reasons why clans are less active is because in order to be an active clan, you need to sink a massive amount of time into it.
Well, and I really agree with that point on a lot of levels. I do think that the time constraint hurts a lot of people. I also think when you're looking at it, a raid, you're talking about playing for 90 minutes to 120 minutes nonstop. Even if you sit down and you grind an arena playlist for 2, 3, 4, 10 hours, you can have those intermissions every 15 minutes. And raids don't work like that. It's constant. I also think an entire issue with raids in general is the fact that generally it's 90 minutes of stale.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been a super huge fan of raids. I think my opinion on this is going to be a little severe to begin with. Other people have been put on this.
Yeah, in my opinion, like I love raids. It's like one of my favorite things about like the whole Halo Clan experience. That was like the thing that brought me here in like around 2013. I do agree that something should be done about raids, maybe make them more accessible for like other players. Or maybe just a new form of combat. Like I can't remember. I think it was Visari's old clan on like Halo MCC when they had like this giant thing of BTB, but say like it was like up to 1,000 kills or something like that. Maybe like so it's maybe a 45-minute game rather than maybe like a whole hour and 30 minutes up. You know what I'm saying?
I think there are certainly raid alternatives. I think I made a film about this or a YouTube video about this like a couple years ago, and it's something that we took a look at in Exodus a little bit prior to disbanding the clan. So I think that there are some clear alternatives for what raids are. I think the main problem is that a lot of clans view raids as like the only mechanism by which clan wars occur, right? Like I don't think in the modern day community it's likely you will see a clan war conducted through 8v8s or modified 8v8s. You certainly wouldn't see it through a 4v4. I don't necessarily agree that even should be done, right? But to directly speak to your point, I think alternatives do exist. It's a question of how do you get clans to adopt that.
Well, and I don't think it's necessarily just alternatives. I also think it's to an extent. I I really do think that raids are an instrumental part of our community. I do. I think they define a lot of what our community is built on, and I think they need to continue being involved in our community in a big way, in the biggest way, and they need to be more present than other forms of battle. What I think the issue with raids as of right now is yes, the time constraint can get very, very rough. I think a lot of clans, if they were willing to drop their raids to 60 minutes, it would be a lot easier for them to gather 8 people and play that raid because 60 minutes is not exactly a huge length of time. I also think a very big important part of making raids more accessible for newer people as well as making them more efficient is creating situations where raids are more combat on both sides. A lot of people are stuck in this traditionalist mindset of raids need to be the defenders have an absolute advantage, and the offensive team needs to have a huge level of skill in order to take the base. And I don't agree with that at all. I think that completely turns off anyone new coming into a raid if they're on the attacking team. And to an extent, I think it turns off anyone new on the defending team, because either way, it's just going to turn into a boring assault. What clans?
Yeah, I agree. I think I don't know if you remember the what was it, CF it was, with like the whole area system. Yeah, that.
Yeah.
I think that
That was
was the
actually the
really good
Commonwealth,
way.
but
Yeah. Oh yeah, my bad. Yeah,
yeah.
Commonwealth, CW, not CF. Um, I think that was a really good raid alternative. I mean, it had the same basics of a raid. You know, the attack and defend, just had a bit more objectives in it. You know, it was a lot, I guess you could say, fairer, if that's a word. Um, you know, with like the lack of power weapons and such.
I don't necessarily agree. I spoke with Vast Contagion about this, and I also spoke with Shadow Sniper about it following the Kelowna Federation. Um, Shadow Sniper, during the war, the area system was never even completed. Like, the Commonwealth never had a capital. They started to implement the system in a war without the system even being complete, which is one of the huge controversies you saw. But I don't necessarily think it's even more fair, right? I think that if the objective is to have a fair battle, I would argue you need something that's symmetrical. Like, you need symmetrical maps, or you need a binary raid system where you have one clan attack a map and then the other clan attacks that same map. And then you take that way both teams get the exact same experience, right? I think that clans don't appear to be extraordinarily interested in having an entirely fair battle. Like, if clans are interested in being fair, clearly we're missing obvious ways to do that. So I
Well,
think, go ahead.
Sorry, not trying to cut you off. I don't think that the conversation should be having an entirely fair battle. I think what it needs to be, and this is a standpoint that I've always stood by for myself, for the officers who helped me run Trident. The person who is in charge of the defending team, the person who is selecting the map, the person who is running the raid, they are responsible for not only the 8 people on their team having a good time, they're responsible for their team and the enemy team, all 16 players, having 60 minutes of fun. And that's what it needs to be looked at. I don't think it necessarily needs to be a fair environment. I think what it needs to be done is it needs to be built as an environment where both teams can have an enjoyable time throughout the course of the battle.
I think this gets quite. This is something I've struggled with, right? Because the question is, okay, if we don't think it should be fair, right, then I'm not sure exactly what raids and wars are trying to achieve, right? If we posit, if we agree that raids don't have to be fair, then why should we ever value a raid win in a war when we know that battle wasn't fair, right? Like, what does that demonstrate to us? What should the third party gain or learn from a result of a battle they know isn't fair?
I agree with that statement, and I think the sentiment is correct. What I'm saying is, I don't think we should be looking for completely flat fields of battle. I feel like it needs to be sloped, but it doesn't need to be sloped at the state it is right now. It,
You mean sloped as in like fairness, not literal map
yeah.
design.
So
Okay.
just for an analogy, so like let's say your average raid has a 1-to-4 ratio, the 1 being attackers winning, the 4 being the defenders winning.
Mm-hmm.
Clans should be looking to design their maps not for that 1-to-4 ratio or a 0-to-5 ratio. They should be looking to design their maps for that 2-to-3 ratio. It should be defendable, it should be practical, but there should also be built-in weaknesses, flaws, designs that teams can take advantage of.
I think that I don't think a ratio solution is really makes sense, right? Because at the end of the day, you're going to get if you're going to argue that there should be some ratio,
Well,
then
that's my analogy.
but like at the end of the day, your core argument is that like it should be only an acceptable level of unfair, right? And the question becomes, well, what level is an acceptable level of unfair? And every clan would have its own opinion of where that bar is, right? So it doesn't really solve anything because the current clan community, or the current consensus, what appears to be, is that most clans appear to be under the impression that yeah, raids shouldn't be fair. The defenders should have some advantage, right? The question always becomes what degree of advantage is too much. And because there's no real consensus there, you get these arguments about map design and about ROE and all that stuff.
I think the defenders should, like what instructor was saying about the idea of the defenders having a more of a advantage. I don't know if this analogy would be really effective, but how when the Americans attacked Japan in that I can't remember. I think it was I just can't remember the battle, but they were attacking them on the beach or whatever. It was pretty unfair. I think a good solution to making it just be a bit more fair is and making it more accessible to like other players and lowering the time bar is just lower the time bar. It's like the general raid time I would say is around an hour or an hour and 30 minutes, maybe make it like 45 minutes and give the attackers more equipment. Maybe like 2 wraiths, maybe some DMRs or whatever. That's just my opinion though.
Anybody else have opinions on this? Is it just me, PMB, Zippy? I feel like we have other people here. Certainly have some input.
I personally believe that the problem with raids now is that we can actually make an entire map. And by that I mean we're not restricted to, if we know a Forge World canvas, we can literally make our own terrain. And I think a lot of clans now make just straight, pathways. This is just one way to the base of, you could say there's plenty of cover, but there's only one way. For example, THL, we try to make we make extensive environments to give, I don't know how to describe this, a more tactical feel, like to give attackers more opportunities to attack a base in different ways instead of just this run and gun from one direction. You know what I mean?
I actually agree with that because I have some maps that I deliberately create where I have 3 ways to goes directly to the base, but also the base has flaws like breakable walls or a access. You have an air vent that you can get into, or there's a drainage pipe or something like that that'll lead you into the base. It makes my guys try to pay attention to their surroundings, not just outside the base, but also inside the base.
No, I didn't mean it like in that sense. I meant, okay, so for an example, right? I personally do not care about like ROE. I'm not very big on it. I'll attack any base just because I can. It's just, to me, it's just fun that way, because most clans, I feel like, will have a very, have somewhat fair, I guess that you say. But one thing that, if you take Forge World, for example, most people had you spawn in Hemorrhage and you would run through, and their base would either be on the island or across, on the other side of the island. So if the base is on the other side of the island, you can either run onto the island, climb the mountain, or go through the tunnels or whatever, or you can wrap around and flank the island itself. So using that as a kind of an example, whenever we make maps, we have our spawn, and out of the spawn, there's like maybe 3 distinct pathways you can obviously go, and then each pathway is just littered with stuff, with different environments. We want our environment to feel like it's actually alive. Our base is going to have maybe 1 to 2 entrances, yes, but you're going to be able to attack from different angles and be able to get shots on from our environment. And if you end up killing one of us, you can set up ambushes and such. It just makes it, ours is a more of a, I guess you could say, role play aspect.
Well, I think along with what Power said, end of the day, every clan views this differently. My general solution to this, and I know this is still not going to solve all the issues, and I know this isn't going to address the ability for raids to be more on an even footing. But I think that every base that any clan puts out should have 2 designed access points, if not 3.
I don't know. I think that perhaps this is perhaps I have a weird perspective of this because I don't really do raids. Like, I'm pretty sure most people know this, right? I never really did raids with Exodus. I sat there really managing policy and ROE and war and all that stuff, right? So when I was looking at raids, what I was looking at was I was not really concerned about how the game played, right? I was concerned about what the results looked like. Like if there's a clan who is winning 90% of the battles they're defending, I think there's a problem. I think there's a problem with something in this battle, right? I think that when I view a clan war, Clan A declares war on Clan B, I think the purpose of a raid or the purpose of any battle, right, should be to demonstrate one clan's superiority in teamwork and combat ability. Those are vague terms. I'm not going to get too nuanced into what exactly they mean because that's not really important, right? But I think that at the end of the day, raids should reward teams that have better teamwork and better combat ability. And I think that when we introduce things that aren't fair, I think we undermine that, right? And I think that if raids become things that are heavily in, if raids aren't fair, I'm still unsure what they're supposed to mean in a clan war. Like, if raids aren't fair, why are we using them for clan wars? What are they trying to achieve?
Okay, well, so I personally, I kind of, I guess you could say, grew up on really unfair. It's and I love really unfair raids when it's stacked against me if I'm attacking in base, right? And this is purely for the reason is it's even though everything is against us and they're kind of the underdog in the situation. If you take that base, it is one of the best feelings that you get. It's an amazing, and you get so much bragging rights from it. For example, is it is good to take a base that is obviously extremely fair, it has 3 entrances, they're only using one sniper, there's plenty of cover, or is it better to take a base that has somewhat good cover, but there's 3 snipers, a tank at the door?
Well, I don't think that's really the topic of conversation that Power is trying
I
to
think
breed.
to my
I think,
point, like to clarify what I'm trying to say here, right, is that like I entirely appreciate like the sense of achievement people who actually do raids get from taking a difficult base, right? Like I remember in Exodus, and I'm sitting back in my Discord chat checking updates from our war against Vast, right? I remember how excited our members were when we won raids, etc., right? That's not my concern. My concern is that suppose THL, I think that's the clan you're currently running. I'm not totally sure, right? So
Yeah.
pretend THL and Exodus are fighting against each other, right? And Exodus is using some crazy OP base, and you don't take it, right? I mean, sure, that sucks, right? But that raid was never fair to you. We go to the community chats and tell everybody we beat your clan in a raid, right? I don't think that's really fair to your clan for us to say we beat you and imply that's at all fair. If there's an 80% chance we're going to win that raid by default, I'm not sure what that win is really supposed to achieve. And because the like likelihood of winning or the ratio as Zippy referred to, right? Because it's sometimes a 5-1 or a 2-3 or 6-1 odds some clan will win, right? A a Exodus raid win might not mean the same thing as a Navcom raid win, or as a THL raid win, or as an NRI raid win, right? And because these things don't carry equal weight, I'm not sure what they're trying to convey at all.
well, and very frankly, I think the issue that stems from this in the war perspective is the fact that a lot of clans, when they engage another clan in a war, they will conduct only raids and they won't view other types of combat, whether it's 4v4, BTB, team tactical, or whatever else their enemy might propose. They won't conduct that form of battle because they know they have this one-sided situation.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like what you just said, like almost completely. Going back to what of making like raids more fair, I think another thing that was like the beauty, not to go back to Reach, but beauty of Reach was Forge World. It was some sort of like, what should I say, template. That's what like everybody practiced on. That's where the boot camps were on. Like that's where you train mountains. And when I think it was THL, I can't remember the other guy. I think
That was the one that brought Forge World up, yeah.
yeah. I think that's another great way. Maybe if we had some sort of universal template that like everybody could use, which I mean that's pretty unlikely.
That's not gonna happen.
Yeah, it's pretty unlikely, but I think that would be an awesome idea of some sorts.
Well, I mean, it all comes down. It all comes down to the leaders and officers of these clans and how they're working with the people who are forging their maps. And it's very individualized based on each and every clan. Like I pride myself on the fact that Craven worked with me and Corey, and we created some incredibly fair maps working together. We created maps that we won on, we lost on, and no matter what, it was constant action, was constantly a good battle. But other clans don't get the same level of enjoyment from that. And I think my biggest issue with raids is the level they're held at within this community. And like I was just saying, a lot of clans exclusively do raids, and it cuts them off from so much growth.
My concern with raids, from once again, like not doing raids policy perspective, right, is that because there's no agreed upon scale of how fair a raid should be, and because certainly raid maps aren't tested for fairness, right, it really makes the idea of a raid win or a raid loss entirely meaningless in the context of a war. And because of that, I think it really harms, like, it really devalues even the purpose of pursuing a war against a clan, because it doesn't, the results pretty much predetermined by whoever is designing maps or however they decide to make ROE. So
Well, I think this is a very difficult topic to get into because, very frankly, though I agree with you, I really do. I would feel it's out of place to not see raids involved in a war, but then it comes.
I think theoretically they're like, this is something we floated with DA and they declined and all that scandal, right? I think one of the things you could look at for, like, how do you keep current raid maps but make raids as a system fair, right? You could have, say, Navcom Exodus are at war. Exodus defends first, right? So we defend Exodus map A. We win that battle, right? So the war is 1-0 Exodus. We then give that same map to Navcom, and then they defend it, right? If that map is super unfair, then we'll lose that second game. It will be 1-1, right? So if clans take turns attacking and defending the same maps, then the level of fairness for any individual battle doesn't matter, because it'll be balanced out when you have to attack or you have to defend that same map. And that encourages fair map design, because you know that you're going to have to attack this super OP map, right? So you're discouraged from making maps OP. That also cleans up ROE in general, because you don't need to go line by line and restrict what guns you can use or what vehicles you can use, right? Because you're encouraged to make the map fair. I think ROEs in general, at least from the way I viewed them as from Exodus perspective, right? When I was sitting down making ROEs are fundamentally designed to, like, make sure the map wasn't super OP so that the attackers had some chance of winning. If you could just rotate maps, that resolves the vast majority of those issues.
Well, I completely agree with that sentiment, because me and Corey had a lot of conversations with a lot of different clans. We'd schedule a raid, and we'd go and we'd look at their map, and me and Corey would be like, "Well, we're not very comfortable raiding on this," and so we'd offer them one of two options: we'll defend on your map and you'll attack us, or we'll give you one of our maps and we'll attack you. And unfortunate as it is, a lot of clans really push back on that. And I think there's a level of discomfort there to an extent, just because people will like that sense of familiarity. Oh, I can just throw on a map and these people will raid it. And so many people are struggling to get out of that mindset of, oh well, back in the day you just raided. Well, back in the day fucking sucked. I'm sorry.
Oh, what are you talking about? Taking maps with like 8 snipers on them was the best thing, Zippy.
Yeah.
Massacre.
Another thing is, I think a good thing I said thing like 4 times. You know how DA and Bellicose, so before Bellicose died, how when they would take over a map or when they like would successfully raid a base, they would like reskin it. I think that would be a great idea. So say if Exodus had a base, they lost the base, or they still had the base and they didn't defend it, correctly, or they did defend it correctly. The other clan that was attacking it can reskin it and make it themed to their liking. Say if TFS attacked it and they can make it TFS themed, then Exodus would have to attack it. I think that would resolve some issues, sort of what you were saying.
To speak with how Exodus actually dealt with this, we made a policy where pretty much anybody could use our maps or use assets from our maps or edit our maps, right? So long as they gave us credit for actually producing that map or that asset or whatever. So you just put that in the map description, right? So to speak to the idea, so like, I think that, yeah, like clans, I don't think, I'm not really a fan of like map ownership being an issue of RP. Like, I'm not a fan of like, if we beat you in battle, we can just take your map, right? Because fundamentally speaking, like that's like an issue of like, it's weird to say that because of our RP or the way we define roleplay, we can grant ourselves the right to use your map, right? I think that's weird. So
I ran into this problem.
I think like the far cleaner example, right? The far cleaner policy is to just be that, well, anybody can use anybody's map so long as they give credit and permission to do so. Same thing if like if I'm pretty sure everybody here has been to school at least once, right? There's a difference between like plagiarism and properly citing something, right? I think that if as long as you properly cite or properly give credit for whatever you're using, that should be fine. You're fine, Michael. I think that so long as you're giving credit or you're as long as you're giving credit for the map or asset or whatever you're using, there shouldn't really be an issue with using other people's maps. I think that first off, I think that harms smaller clans. If you're a super small clan you made last week, right? Chances are you don't have Exodus Forge team or NRI's Forge team or whatever behind you to make 40,000 maps a week, right? And because of that, I think that having effectively an open map with credit policy helps facilitate more activity in the community as a whole.
Well, and I also think very frankly, when Trident does relaunch, and I don't know when, and I'm not
tomorrow.
No. But one of the things that we discussed before we ended and never actually in place is having a public open map policy. Because one of the things that we're really trying, one of the things that I really believe in, and that I can't speak for Corey, but from what Corey's told me, he really believes in, is making raids 60, 90, 120 minutes of fun. And I feel like our maps are designed to be fun, and I want other clans to try using them and see how they play and understand how they play.
Let's switch topics because we've been on this one for 35 minutes and I feel like it'd be a good time to swap off. Second topic, right? What was it? Well, how do we make raids more enjoyable? Pretty much the same question, so we'll ignore that one, right? What do professionalism or culture mean to relating to clans, and how are these things important, right? Michael, you're the one that introduced this topic. I know you wanted somebody from the foundation or whatever to be here, but I think that this isn't a topic they own, so let's just discuss it with the people we have here.
All right, yeah, that's fine. I guess like my main curiosity was that, these guys are talking about it and they're obviously influential, like to a lot of smaller clans in the community right now. Like, I don't think that's even debatable at this point. Like, I think we all have to kind of acknowledge that they do influence a lot of smaller clans.
Oh yeah.
So whenever they go around preaching professionalism and culture, I don't think we can argue that that's necessarily a bad thing, but there is no definition of what they mean. There's no examples. They're not really giving any like standards to what they mean. We also need to make sure, I think, like one of the questions I was asking, like, does professionalism average in with intelligence? Like, if someone's extremely professional but not that smart, like, what matters more, their intelligence or like how they're acting? Because we see these clans that are obviously ignorant. They don't really know what's going on. They've not handled a lot of situations. They're not experienced, and they say dumb things and do dumb things. But they act right when they do them, and that excuses their stupidity to those clans that preach about having more culture and professionalism. So I guess it's just a bit confusing to me, like where most clans stand on professionalism and culture. Like, how does it matter to a lot of people or just some people?
Well, okay, I'm gonna breach right into this too. So I think one of the biggest misconceptions that the clans like DA and NRI present about professionalism, and I agree with them in the sense that clans should act a certain way towards each other, and the leadership of clans should communicate with each other in a certain way. I feel like and I know I've gone against this at times depending on the day. I feel as though when I'm a clan leader, or when I'm running something or an officer for a clan, I should always be treating the officers and leaders of other clans with the utmost respect and giving them everything that's due to them. What I think the big conversation that comes in for me, or the big like point of turning for me, is the difference between conversation between an officer and an officer and a member, and a member of a member and a member. And I think that really becomes where things fall off, and that's where I start to really disagree with a lot of what clans like DA state about clans like Trident or Exodus, because the actual leadership of this clan is upholding a well-performed conduct. They're holding themselves to a certain standard of speaking politely and approaching a conversation openly. But then I feel as though, I can probably dig in my phone and find examples of Axios doing this, and it's not just him, but he's just the first one that comes to mind, of a single member of a clan saying something that isn't necessarily the most classy thing in the world to say, and that being turned against that clan for the usage of these groups preaching about professionalism. Professionalism needs to be something that is present within the leadership, the representation of a clan. And I understand it's a lot harder nowadays with the community chats because all your members are talking to all the members of all other clans. And that's part of the reason you need to just let it go. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I think that it's important to realize, like, if we want to go nuts and bolts and actually talk about what NRI and DA were doing, right? It's important to understand that the reason why the issue of professionalism and culture and all that stuff was even brought up to begin with was because they were fighting effectively a cold proxy war against clans they felt were threatening, right? You realize that the quote foundation and establishment didn't exist as terminology prior to the Exodus DA war, right? And the issue of like saying that clans such as like Navcom and Exodus and UGN and all these clans were troll clans didn't arise until Exodus versus DA, right? A lot of the language we've seen following this has been effectively like an ideological war used to leverage or to provide some sort of uh, pedigree to the clans they are a part of, right? And to establish themselves as legitimate clans, while to delegitimize clans they felt were threatening or clans they were actively at war with, right? This is something that, if you go back and take a look at the leaked DA NRI conversation from like January, it's effectively what they're saying, right? We want to get all these small clans to lend us legitimacy and then declare a war win. So I think that I don't even think it's really beneficial to discuss the topic in context of, well, what do these clans think, right? I think it's more productive to say, like, well, what do we believe professionalism is, right? Because if we agree that they haven't really defined it, then I think that we're under some obligation to at least attempt to understand and provide some sort of clear definition of what these things actually mean.
Why I think
Professionalism's kind of self-explanatory in a way, but I don't understand the whole "what the fuck is culture" supposed to even mean half the
Yeah, I
time.
think that culture. Yeah, I think I'm not a
That's a
fan of
lot.
the. I'm not a fan of culture is the thing because I think
It's not.
fundamentally speaking, culture is an internal thing so long as it doesn't affect the image of the community or clans as a whole. So I don't necessarily think culture is a thing. I think I, I Zibby brought up a really good point, right? Or not Zibby. Michael brought up a really good point where it's like, suppose somebody is conducting really problematic RP or role play, right? But they're doing it in like a calculated professional way. Like, how should we view that? Suppose the clan goes around and declares war against literally the entire community, but they do it in a professional way. They type up all these documents and make it look official, right? Like, how should we view that?
We
I think
laugh at them even more.
I think yeah, I think I think what you're doing matters a little more than how you do it. Um,
well, I guess when I think of professionalism, I think of it in the sense of okay, what actions am I taking? Like I don't think it comes down to words or how you approach something. I think it's what you do.
I think it's more like contextual. Like if I'm talking to, say, fucking Power when he's leading Exodus, I'm gonna be a bit more less of a fucking cancer than I am when I'm just memeing kids in my fucking off-topic chats.
thank you, thank you.
Shut up, Power. You're a meme anyway.
Watch your tone.
Oh,
No, I think that's a good. I think that I'm not sure. I think a lot of times when we end up talking about professionalism and culture, right, we end up talking ourselves in circles because it's such a vague term that doesn't really mean a lot, right? Because if we don't define like how clans should behave and what like good clan roleplay even is, then I'm not sure to what standard we're saying you're professional to, right? I'm not. I don't know. I think it's a problem that we face as a community.
I do think it's a very like broad conversation. I think the biggest thing this revolves around in the community as of right now is just you have clans pointing fingers at other clans whose members act a certain way, whether or not their leadership does, and saying, "Well, we don't want to associate with you."
I think there's some reasonable barrier for like what the average clan ever like. Suppose Exodus members are literally doxing people, or like just running community chats and talking shit all day, 24/7, 365. Right? I think there is some reasonable obligation to make sure your members are behaving in a tolerable way in most of the time, right? I don't think that we should be as concerned as to say, well, suppose one Exodus member posts like two memes once, right? And make a big deal out of that and say, well, this clan is full of trolls, blah blah blah, right? Like if your clan has 80 members and 60 of them are in community chats, it's nearly impossible to keep all of them in order all of the time, right? The reason why some clans, right, who only have 3 or 4 people in a community chat just ban all their members from joining community chats, it's a lot easier to present a professional face because your members just aren't publicly visible.
I honestly like agree with you on that, but there's only a certain extent you're able to hold your members back for when it comes to professionalism. Yeah, you can stop them from talking shit, but on top of that, like in the long run, they're their own person, so it's harder to stop them if they're not willing to listen. I know you can like kick them out and they won't be your member anymore, but since you couldn't control them from the beginning, it's always going to be that label that you can't control the rest of your members. And that's what I see as an issue. Just because one member does something, it doesn't mean all the members are like that, or you have bad leadership in the way that you can't control your members at all. And I see a lot of clans bashing clans for not being able to have that tight hold on all their members.
Well, okay. I'm going to go into this for a second because this is a fairly good example. For a long time, Trident and Navcom were engaging in battles at least once or twice a week, and Trident was coming out victorious more often than not. And this was created by a member of Orion Initiative, and this is something that grew very, very popular among the members of Trident. And I remember I went and I spoke to Tommy at the time, and me and Tommy had a long conversation, and there was some anger out of him that this was coming from our members, and I sort of sat down and had this conversation with him. Well, the views of the members of Trident don't necessarily reflect the views of the leadership, and I think that's what's important, is having good leadership to leadership communication, because it's I agree with Harbinger. It's so hard to get your members to act a certain way in a community chat. Like, they just want to talk. They just want to bullshit. They just want to have fun. And I think what comes down to is, when we're trying to maintain this professional political RP aspect, it needs to come down to a leadership to leadership conversation.
Yeah. To give some perspective as to how I treat this as CFAO, there are situations, I think this might have happened with Navcom as well. It's been forever, forgive me, right? So I'll pose, I guess, a hypothetical, and I'll explain what I view as like acceptable behavior for a clan leader to clan leader case like this, right? Where suppose I'm CFAO of Trident, and this is going on with Navcom and Trident, right? And you have Navcom saying like, "Yo, we don't think this is appropriate for your members to be doing," right? I think that at that point, like, once another clan comes to you and says, "We have issue with what your members are doing," right? Like, I think that once they've expressed some concern, then you're under an obligation to address that concern in some way, right? So, yes, you aren't at fault for what your member has done, but once you're aware another clan is concerned, then I think you're under obligation to address that concern. So I think that, to give like some real example of this curse, so suppose I'm CFO tried and Navcom comes to me and says this meme's inappropriate, right? If I fail to stop our members from posting that meme, then Navcom has reason to be concerned, right? Then you have failed to address their concern, right? But so long as they come to me and I tell our members to stop posting that meme and we stop that meme, that's fine. Okay, so case, because this actually did happen to Exodus, a more clear example is Exodus versus Vast, and then Z4 posted, not Z4, Z Mark Anthony posted the how to Vast video, where that raid when you might have seen that video. But
Oh yeah,
Vast came to us and was livid about this video. Like, it's inappropriate what your members are doing. This is not acceptable behavior. I said, okay, I'll address that concern. I went to Z Mark, said, Z Mark, I need you to take down this video. This is inappropriate. And he did so, right? That's a proper exchange for what should happen when another clan upsets some other clan. What would not have been appropriate is for Vast to come to me and say, "Yo, we have issues with what this video is. This is clearly wrong and problematic." And then I say, "Well, our leadership didn't post it, so it's not a concern at all." And I do nothing. I don't talk to Z4. I don't talk to Z Mark Anthony about it. Blah blah blah. That's problematic.
you guys take memes way too seriously.
I take all the memes super seriously. You stop.
Listen, memes are life, man.
Well,
Like, I got a good chuckle out of that picture when I saw it.
yeah, I do agree. The memes
I
are
got a
pretty
better
funny.
chuckle about.
Yeah, I think
fucking-
generally speaking, people people get too ruffled about it to begin with. Like, I can't think of any time where I went to some other clan and said, like, you guys need to stop memeing us, right? That might be because of what arose out of the Eggs and Vast War with how memes are treated in general. But I don't necessarily think. I think that memes between clans that are already hostile is okay. I think that in relation to Trident Navcom, where it becomes a concern, right? So where I can see it becoming a concern is, well, there's no current hostilities between Exit or I'm gonna say Exodus Navcom because this is fine. We did it. Exodus and Navcom did a bunch of friendly raids pretty often. Passenger, I'm sure you're aware of this, right? I
Yeah, I was
tried to
around for the damn thing.
yeah, I tried to make it pretty clear to Exodus members that in the event we win, we aren't going to go public and say like, "Yo, Navcom's super trash. We beat them all the time," right? Like I think that if the raid is friendly, you're under some obligation to not publicly shame a clan for losing in a friendly raid. That's why it's friendly to begin with. So I could see why like some clans might get ruffled about friendly raids and memes resulting from that. But in terms of like active war, like if you're at war with your clan, I don't see memes as being problematic as long as they aren't like exceptionally cruel or except like real life stuff. Whatever.
Well, this actually opens up into another topic that I think we really should address, and it kind of dives into the current. It kind of dives into the current mindset of, well, this clan is doing stuff I don't like, so just based on that, I'm gonna avoid them entirely. And I think that really hurts the community in a lot of ways. Um,
I disagree. I think that this is something I've thought about for a while, right? Um, I think that at some point, I think it's in the mission or the server information thing of this page, right? Where it's like, at some point, we must acknowledge that some individuals or clans are so severely disruptive, dishonest, or problematic that having them participate in quote community activity damages the community, right? Because for you to say that like I think it's inappropriate that we avoid interacting with some clans, right? That what you're correct that's what you're saying. I just want to make sure I'm not misphrasing.
I That's what I'm saying, but I said what you're talking about is at a severe level. I'm talking about at a very base level. Oh, this clan did something I didn't like one time, so I'm just gonna pretend they don't exist.
I mean, yeah, clearly that's dumb. But I think that if we acknowledge it, like, well, there are some clans that are going to be so problematic. Like, if there's a clan that shows up and, for example, like, they're literally doxing people 24/7, I think that it's reasonable for us to not interact with them. Or if their clan that shows up and they're literally Nazis, like I think it's reasonable that we don't interact with them, right? I think that that's harmful to the community and its well-being, right? Or if there's some clan that refuses to acknowledge raid losses ever, that's problematic. We probably shouldn't interact with them.
Well, going
Action,
into
everyone.
that, I don't mean like change the topic or anything, but I think people like that might actually like help out the clan community. People like that do that, like Marshall Goldpack. I know he did that quite a bit. Like people like the 99th Regiment, like they made videos about him, which like kind of I wouldn't say united the clan community, but got like a bunch of people together, and also got like activity flowing and such.
Don't really agree.
Yeah, I don't necessarily agree with that sentiment either.
That ends up with the whole like there's this interesting phenomenon regarding like human psychology where it's like if you see something that you disagree with and you tell everybody about that thing and why you disagree with it, a lot of times you actually end up with increasing the amount of people that believe in this dumb idea, right? Where it's like, for example, suppose I tell the entire American public that Argentina did not invent AIDS, right? Statistically speaking, there will be some people that by hearing that alone will come to the conclusion that clearly that's a topic people talk about. Maybe Argentina did invent AIDS, right? So by telling everybody that Clan X is super problematic and nobody should interact with Clan X, statistically speaking, some people will think, well, maybe they're biased. Clan X is probably a good clan. I should interact with them. That's just like a fact of human psychology. So in telling like to go public and say nobody should interact with this clan and broadcast that a lot of times undermines the objectives you're trying to achieve.
Unless we just sanction everyone.
Yes, we
That
sanction
works.
everyone. That works.
I think the issue stems from the fact that a lot of leaders nowadays, in my eyes, the first thing they jump to when something that happens that they just completely don't agree with, or something that happens that rubs them the wrong way, their first action is to just chop it off at the knees, chop that relation. Don't speak to that person, won't allow that person to speak to them, just tries to pretend that entity doesn't exist. And that's where the flaw comes in, is the lack of willingness to have an open conversation. And I think there's very little of that in the community right now. I think a lot of clans refuse to interact with each other by just sitting down and talking.
I mean, yeah, I think there's a danger there in like over fracturing the community, ending up with a crap ton of smaller. Yeah, I'm trying to how to phrase it effectively. There is a
Like,
concern that by simply cutting off communications or stopping interaction at the very first sign of like hostilities or tension, right? You end up fracturing the community to the point in which nobody talks to anybody. Like that's a real concern. Um, I think that there should be pretty substantial historical evidence as to why you don't want to interact with some given clan, right? Or some like precedent.
like with how we barely interact with DA now, but just because every time we fucking do, it's just complete AIDS. And we've just said, fuck that. We've got other people we can fuck with.
I mean, I think that, in my opinion, like the reason why this speaks to DA in particular as to why they might be concerning, right, is because I'm of the opinion that it's not really appropriate to pursue wars of aggression. I think that historically wars of aggression have harmed the community. It's hard to think of any situation where two clans went to war and that benefited the community long term. So to speak that and compare it to what DA has done, DA pursued a war of aggression against the UGNs. DA pursued a war of aggression against Exodus. DA pursued a war of aggression against Bellicose, right? You have NRI saying that what they've done against Bellicose was inappropriate, right? You have them effectively agreeing with Michael. I forget the exact document. I'm not sure if I have it on hand. You might. Where like the war they pursued against you guys is not really justified. I'm sure somebody dug back at Discord logs. You might be able to find that, but I'm lazy. I can't do it at the moment.
To find what?
Where DA said their war against UGN to begin with was not really justified or appropriate.
The one.
Back in like August last year or whatever.
Yeah, okay, all right, yeah.
Like we had this dialogue with them back in January of this year, right? Like when a clan has just constantly pursues wars of aggression with no real improvement of that behavior long term, I think that's problematic, right? I think those are the types of clans that are like, okay, we could say for the past year they've behaved in this way that is clearly harmful to other clans in the community. It's not really beneficial to anybody. I think in those cases there might be justification. But I think in like Navcom posts some memes about Exodus, we aren't going to talk to Navcom ever again. Like clearly that's stupid.
All right, reform Exodus, and I will flood you with memes, and we'll test that theory.
Watch your tone. I will become GCO.
Why do you tell him to watch his tone when he's been dropping F-bombs the entire time? Don't say anything to that.
Terrible.
It's like fascinating.
We're an hour in, so I think I'm going to conclude the official meeting, and I'll stop recording in 3, 2, 1.